Morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's webinar looking at disposable gloves and how to navigate the murky waters of social responsibility and sustainability claims. My name is Jim Foreman. I'm a Strategic Portfolio Manager for Avantor, and just like to go through, before we go to the webinar, just some admin for us. So before we begin, we will be recording the session, so don't worry. If you miss anything, we'll be able to come back to it. If you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the question section, and we'll cover them later on. We'll make sure there's time allowed during the presentation. And if there are any issues, then please contact us at the email address on the screen. So now I'd like to introduce Gonzague Valliere, who is the Controlled Environment Segment Specialist at OM Halyard, who will take us through today's presentation. As I say, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the questions box, and we'll cover them later on. So enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. As Jim said, my name is Gonzague. I work for Owens & Minor Halyard. We are a glove manufacturer and a glove brand. We specialize in laboratory gloves as well as clean room gloves. And today we propose to give our views and advice on everything to do related to sustainability with disposable gloves. So sustainability is only one of the many challenges people working in our industry need to tackle. But it's become one very important challenge. Sustainability is in many ways a buzzword. It's an ubiquitous term. It's often associated with environmental efforts, like reducing the carbon footprint of any product or process. But true sustainability goes much deeper than that. Of course, you've got your environment actions and concerns, but sustainability means also taking care of the people manufacturing the products you use or delivering the services you use. And also caring for the people, caring for the users of those products or services. To some extent, sustainability is also related to good management practices, so good governance. We won't really talk much about that, but I'm sure you understand for any company to be sustainable on the long term, it also needs to be somewhat profitable. So let's talk first about social responsibility, as it's often the part that people forget about when we talk about sustainability. It's clearly the responsibility of manufacturers like us to do the right things, to care for the people who make the products, in that case, the gloves, and not just within our own operations, but at our subcontractors or service providers. There isn't, however, a very standard way to ensure a company has a very good social responsibility. We'll come back to that a bit later. So it's the responsibility of you, the users, the deciders, or if you're just an influencer in the decision to purchase a glove or another, it's your responsibility to ask questions, understand the answers that are given to you, and verify that this information is indeed correct. So you have to ask, understand, and verify how the gloves are manufactured, where they are manufactured, if it's manufactured by the glove brand you see on display, or if it's made by a subcontractor. You have to understand and verify in what conditions the gloves are manufactured. We can share an example. I really invite you to do your own research. You can see a few links if you want easy access to information from open sources and reputable journalistic sources. And I wanted to share with you this example with Brightway. So a few years ago, Brightway, who is a manufacturer based in Malaysia, they work mostly for other brands. So they manufacture for other companies. And they were found to have labor practices that were considered as modern slavery, forced labor. Actually, if you consider the United Nations definition for forced labor, they give 11 indicators. So if you find any one of those 11 indicators as a practice at any company, they can be considered as using forced labor or modern slavery. So out of those 11 indicators, based on the UN's definition, Brightway was found to have 10 of those 10 out of 11 practices with forced labor. I'm not telling you that to just eat on Brightway, assuming it's a competitor of ours, just an example. And Brightway is actually still the only manufacturer of gloves still on the United States ban list. So any glove made at Brightway is not allowed in the United States. We in Europe don't have a similar system, unfortunately. So we don't necessarily close our borders to certain products. At some point, 6 glove manufacturers were banned by the US. Brightway is the only one remaining. And in itself, while it's an indication that forced labor is a thing still nowadays, it's not, from centuries ago. It still happens today. But the most worrying thing for me is that this was discovered in 2021. But previous independent audits had actually revealed some of the flaws in the labor conditions at Brightway. Independent social audits, so companies, customers of Brightway, had mandated independent surveyors, auditors, to go at Brightway and inspect the production. The reports from those auditors listed a few examples of bad practices, forced labor, and so on. But interestingly, the executive summaries of those reports concluded that everything was well and there was no concern, there was no modern slavery or forced labor at Brightway, even though in the text, in the bulk of the report, they were giving examples of forced labor. And based on that, some customers of Brightway, including 2 very prominent brands of gloves, continued working with Brightway as a subcontractor. So when the scandal finally came to light, those companies, the customers of Brightway, had to very quickly, stop all links with Brightway. They severed all ties very quickly, which is a very good thing they did. And they had to pull away from the market some products made at Brightway, which was an inconvenience for everybody was using those gloves in the market. So what you can do as a user of gloves, as I mentioned before, is to ask, understand, and verify. And the example of Brightway tells us you should not just rely on someone else having done the job to verify. You need to have your own opinion about what's going on. So it can start very easily. Just invite a representative of the glove brand to your premises, or you can do that online, of course. And ask questions. Ask where the gloves are manufactured, how they are manufactured, in what conditions, and keep asking until you have had the answers you need. You can also send a questionnaire. You probably send quality questionnaires to some of your suppliers for critical products. You can easily add questions in there related to the social responsibility. Just make sure that those questions will not be only about the brand itself, but about the actual manufacturing site. Very few brands of gloves on the market are actual manufacturers. Many are just brands. They are very light companies, not virtual companies, but very light. They do design, certification, so legal and regulatory. They do sales, but they don't actually do the manufacturing. That's subcontracted. And when it comes to social responsibility, the risks are at manufacturing rather than with office jobs. You can go as far as doing an in-person audit, going there to verify the real conditions. That's not going to be realistic for all of you as customers. If you only purchase a limited quantity of gloves, it's just not going to be worth the cost of travel. But whatever method you choose to obtain your information, I really strongly recommend that you enter into a change notification agreement with that brand. It can be through your distributor. VWR, for example, offers that service to have a change notification. But make sure that your change notification agreement covers the manufacturing locations, not just manufacturing, but also processing, and if that's the case, sterilization locations. Because again, you don't want to have only information about the brand, but about the actual manufacturing facilities. And with that change notification agreement, if the brand in the future decides to use a different subcontractor for manufacturing, then you will be notified and you can ask again the same questions about the social responsibility of that new company they will use for production. At this point, you might be thinking that some labels exist, some third-party certifications exist that do that job for you, essentially. EcoVadis is probably the best known one, but not the only one. And you might assume that if you see the EcoVadis or whatever logo on a product or on documentation, it means the products have been evaluated already. I would really caution you to rely too much on third-party certifications, whatever the name of the company is, it's EcoVadis or any other. Don't rely too much on their evaluation. If you don't understand the criteria of that certification, the performance level expected to reach a bronze, silver, or gold, or whatever ratings they have, if you don't understand, very importantly, the scope of that certification, then you have actually very little information. I can give you an example. As you can see here on screen, an EcoVadis silver rating for CSR, standing for corporate social responsibility. If you only look at that quickly, you'll see EcoVadis silver. Yeah, it's good. It's not gold or platinum, but silver is better than bronze, better than nothing, and that's entirely true. But you might be missing on a few clues. So first, this rating is only for the corporate social responsibility. Don't make the mistake of assuming it also applies to the environmental sustainability of the products, because in that case it does not. It's only for social responsibility. And it's important to understand the scope of that certification. The company in question, it's not us. I'm not going to say who. It's one of our competitors. They do have this EcoVadis silver certification, which is to their credit. But you have to understand this company is not an actual manufacturer. And we can question then, in terms of social responsibility, what is the scope of this certification? Does it apply only to their own activities, which is going to be only office jobs, in that case in Europe? It's a European brand. Or does it apply also to the subcontractors they use for manufacturing, and they are going to be located in Asia? If it applies only to their European activities, well, I'm sorry to say, it's very easy to achieve a silver or whatever rating for social responsibility in Europe. We have very strong labor laws, and when you have only essentially office jobs, you're going to have good labor conditions. The risk, again, is really at manufacturing. So if you don't work with a brand that's an actual manufacturer, you have to be cautious about anything they claim in terms of social responsibility. You need to understand if it applies only to their core operations, what's within their own company, or if it also applies to the subcontractors they use. Moving on now to environment sustainability or environment responsibility. There again, it's your responsibility to ask, understand, and verify. And same as with social responsibility, as we discussed before, you can very easily ask for a meeting with the brand, send a questionnaire, audit, and importantly, sign a change notification agreement. And for the same reasons, you have to be cautious with third-party certifications. If you don't understand, again, the criteria, the performance level, or the scope of that certification, well, ask questions until you understand it and until you're confident you know what this certification actually means. One thing to keep in mind, particularly with the sustainability certifications, in many cases, what's certified is the company. It's not the products. Some third-party certifications really apply to the products themselves, but most of them only look at what the company does for the environment. And I'll share another example. Also another company I will not name. They do a lot of good things in terms of environment sustainability. Really a lot. They're one of the probably best examples out there. And they received recently a gold rating for sustainability with EcoVadis. That company, however, is very large. They don't manufacture only disposable gloves, they manufacture other products. And some of the gloves they present in their catalog they actually manufacture themselves, but a large share of the gloves under their brand are just purchased. They are subcontracted to someone else. And there again, my question is going to be, if you see an EcoVadis rating or whatever third-party certification rating for sustainability, does it really apply to the gloves you purchase from that brand? Were those gloves manufactured by the company itself, or was it outsourced? And if it's outsourced, does the rating, the third-party certification also applies to the product? And in many cases, it doesn't. The third-party certification will only relate to procedures and actions the company has at very high level, but it will not give any detail as to the sustainability advantages of individual products. So when you evaluate gloves, or when you look at the gloves you use now, really question the claims they make. And I would always advise to look for sustainability claims that relate to the gloves rather than to the company representing the gloves, so to the brand of the gloves. Because then you are sure that if they say the gloves are manufactured using a certain share of renewable energy, you know it's related to that glove. If the claim is the company uses a certain percentage of renewable energy, you don't know that it relates to the glove you're using. If that glove is subcontracted to someone else who uses petrol to fuel their plants, then you don't benefit from the sustainability advantage you thought you were. And that brings me to looking at different claims you might see for disposable gloves. And you will normally see them related to a specific point in the life cycle of the disposable glove. It can be from the raw material all the way to the end of life of that product. And I propose we take them one by one to see what kind of claims you can see and the pitfalls you have to be wary of. First on the list, then raw materials. We start early on in the supply chain. If you look only at those photos here on the screen, one quite obviously is some form of forests or a tree plantation rather. It's a latex tree plantation, so EVA trees to make latex. The other picture you see is very obviously some sort of heavy industry. It's petrochemical industry. And if you look only at those pictures, you will already have an idea of which is better for the environment or which is polluting more than the other. But I invite you to reconsider that. Looks can be deceiving. Latex, which is used to manufacture a lot of gloves, well, it's a natural product. It comes from the sap of EVA trees. And although it looks bucolic, a lot of green stuff, it's not without heavy cost to the environment. Rubber plantations, so the tree plantations, the latex tree plantations, cover a very, very large area. It's estimated between 14 and 24 million hectares in Southeast Asia. 14 million hectares is a conservative estimation. 24 is a more realistic estimation. I've put in the middle of the screen the source if you want to look this up and more information. To give you an idea of what this area represents, it's same area as some European countries. 14 million hectares, a conservative estimation, that's the same size as Greece, for example. 24 million hectares, a more realistic estimation, that's the size of the United Kingdom. So you can imagine size of an entire European country full of latex tree plantations. So it's quite massive. You might have heard as well of oil palm plantations. Palm oil is bad for many reasons. It's bad for your health, but it has had a lot of negative criticism due to its environmental impact. The oil palm plantations take a lot of space, and they are a driver for deforestation, loss of habitat, and loss of biodiversity. It's estimated that the oil palm plantations represent 21 million hectares in Southeast Asia. And you can see the rubber tree plantations, it's about the same size. So if you've heard criticism about the oil palm plantations, you can consider it's about the same problem we have with latex tree plantations. They drive deforestation. It's estimated 4 to 6 million hectares were, or 4 to 6 million hectares of native forest were lost in the past 30 years due to the latex tree plantations. And 4 to 6 million hectares, again, that's size of some European countries like Switzerland or the Netherlands or Denmark. They are around the 4 million hectares mark. So the size of a country like Switzerland or the Netherlands or Denmark lost to deforestation in only 30 years. So it's quite a big problem. And the deforestation leads to a loss of habitat for many species and a loss of biodiversity. So yes, latex itself is a natural product, but it does come with a very heavy cost to the environment. And I say latex is a natural product. However, the latex gloves are not a natural product. It's due to the manufacturing process. It's the same for latex or nitrile gloves. You need to go through a chemical reaction called vulcanization to turn a liquid, gooey substance like the raw latex into rubber, something that's going to keep its shape, in that case, the shape of a glove. And that chemical reaction, vulcanization, is not easily reversible. It can be reversed in a lab, but yeah, it's going to take a long time in nature for latex gloves to biodegrade because they have been, the chemical chains have been transformed into something else. Plus, the latex gloves contain other ingredients like pigments, antioxidants, accelerators that can have an impact for the environment also. Synthetics, however, so we go to the second half of the screen. Synthetics like nitrile or neoprene come from the petrochemical industry, and it's not virtuous by any means, of course not. I guess the image here is a good representation. It's not natural at all. But I would argue that the impact of this industry can be contained. It can be mitigated in terms of just geographical scope, we are not talking about millions of hectares. Clearly not. And if that's a heavy if, but if policies are in place to limit pollution released by those chemical plants, then the impact can be limited. So we, as a species, we have the means to limit the impact of the petrochemical industry, whereas with latex tree plantations, well, they have to be there. There's no alternative to that. While we talk about raw materials, and particularly with the synthetics, we see sometimes gloves on the market that claim to be biodegradable. In the case of latex, that's a questionable claim. They biodegrade, but quite slowly. But nitrile biodegradable gloves is not exactly scientifically accurate, I would say. The way the companies claim these gloves are biodegradable is that thanks to the addition of other ingredients, enzymes in many cases, or types of sugars, the gloves are going to degrade faster. And they give you studies or results based on CO2 emissions. So when the glove starts emitting CO2, well, it means they start breaking down. And that's how those so-called biodegradable studies are made. But nitrile is coming from the petrochemical industry. It's not a natural product. It's synthetic, and it's not going to biodegrade, no matter how many additives or enzymes you add to the gloves. All those additives will do is degrade the physical structure of the glove faster to break it down into smaller pieces, but the chemical chains are not going to be significantly impacted by those additives. And those chemical chains are not bioassimilable in any way. So all those biodegradable nitrile gloves do is really just break down faster into small pieces and make the pollution invisible rather than very visible. Another aspect in the life cycle of the gloves is production. Production is where a lot of the environmental impact happens. Making gloves, whether it's latex or nitrile or any other material, making gloves is very energy intensive and very water intensive. I give you some examples here related to laboratory gloves or general purpose gloves, not to clean room gloves. But just to give you an idea, and those numbers are, I'm not saying they are averages, they are examples that can be found. So to manufacture 1,000 laboratory gloves, you need about 100 kilowatt hours of energy. In many cases, that's going to be electricity, however it's produced. So to give you an idea of what it represents, with 100 kilowatt hours, I can drive 500 kilometers with my electric car, which means for every pair of gloves you use, well, the energy to make that pair of gloves is equivalent to the energy needed to drive an electric car 1 kilometer. Electric cars are heavy, so one kilometer to push an electric car is quite a lot of energy. Water consumption is also quite large. There, the numbers are going to vary quite widely from one manufacturer to the other, but roughly speaking, 1,000 gloves will require about 500 liters of water. 500 liters, that's running about 6 or 7 baths at home, or 10 washing machine cycles to wash your clothes. That's about the quantity of water used. And again, for one pair of gloves, it means manufacturing that one pair of gloves will have required about 1 liter of water. That 1 liter of water is not necessarily, lost. It's not disappeared. It just has gone through the facility, and then it's released back to the environment. However, there are some losses. Roughly 10 to 15% of all the water consumed is not released back into the environment. Some of it has evaporated. So it is released to the environment, but not to the local waterways. But some of it is also captured into the gloves. A small fraction of the water molecules will be used in the chemical reactions and be bonded into the gloves, essentially. But yeah, in summary, glove manufacturing is very energy and water intensive. So it's a good idea if you are looking for sustainable options when it comes to disposable gloves, to prefer gloves that have been manufactured with a large share of renewable energy. It can be biomass, solar, wind, pick your choice according to what's available on the market or what the glove brands claim. But it's a very effective way to reduce the carbon footprint of the gloves you use just by picking gloves that have been made with a large part of renewable energy. Keep in mind that some countries in Southeast Asia, for example China, still have an electricity production at national level, which relies heavily on very polluting sources like coal or petrol. Some use natural gas, which is better, but still not great. So again, it's important for you to understand not just what type of energy is used to make the gloves, but where the gloves were manufactured, because that will inform also the type of energy source was used. And also prefer a glove where you have a claim related to water management. So making sure the water used in production is not coming from the municipal water, not from the tap, but has been taken from the local waterways, because then it doesn't put strain on the municipal water for the local population. Make sure the brand has a policy to reduce water consumption year on year, or at least at some intervals, and ask questions about how the water is treated before it's released to the environment. Of course, you don't want to release water to the local waterways if it still has pollutants in it. Next stop in the life cycle of glove manufacturing is packaging. So for laboratory gloves or general purpose gloves that are packed in cardboard boxes, like you can see on the upper image, it's quite easy, thankfully. Those boxes are made of cardboard, so it's very easy to have them made from recycled material, recycled paper and cardboard. So if the boxes are only made with recyclable packaging, well, I would say it's not good enough, because it's very easy to have actual recycled materials in those boxes. There's also an advantage for you to prefer larger pack counts, meaning there's going to be less packaging per glove when you purchase and use those gloves. For cleanroom gloves, it's a bit more difficult to be sustainable. Cleanroom gloves have to be packed in all plastic packaging. Most of it is going to be recyclable. It's LDPE, low density polyethylene, which is easily recyclable now in pretty much every country in the world, I suppose. You have to be a bit careful about the pill pouches for sterile gloves. So sterile gloves can be packed in different ways, but usually the primary packaging is a pill pouch. So you have an aseptic presentation of the gloves. These pill pouches are typically made of a laminated film, which is technically recyclable, but your local recycling facilities might not be equipped to recycle that type of film. So they might consider it as non-recyclable waste. So you have to be a bit careful there, and I would advise that you research with your sustainability officer or waste management officer where the waste is going and to make sure this laminated film can be recycled. Technically, it would be possible to have LDPE bags made from recycled LDPE. It's readily available in many industries, in many products. But the clean room industry has been reluctant to accept recycled plastic packaging, at least for the primary contact. I hope this resistance is going to fade away, at least for the outer packaging. That would allow us manufacturers to use recycled plastic in our packaging, which would further reduce impact of packaging overall. With clean room gloves, you can also have an impact in choosing larger pack counts. So if you have more gloves in a pack, it means less packaging per glove, but it will also mean fewer resources used during clean room transfer. So every time you go from a area to a cleaner area, you need to wipe or maybe even disinfect the packaging clean, and then you transfer the consumable, in that case, the gloves, in a pass-through box to the next level of clean room. So if you have more gloves in a pack, you're going to spend less time and resources doing that clean room transfer. Transport is also a non-negligible part of the environmental impact of gloves. Sadly, there you have very few options, and we have, as manufacturers, we have very few options to improve anything there. Virtually all disposable gloves are manufactured in Southeast Asia. To my knowledge, there are only 2 factories in Europe, one fairly small one and one very small one. Both are geared towards medical exam gloves, not really towards laboratory gloves, and absolutely not able to manufacture clean room gloves. And those 2 manufacturing plants in Europe, obviously very limited capacity. So it means virtually all disposable gloves on the market are transported by sea from Southeast Asia to Europe. And there's going to be very little differentiation from a brand to another related to the impact. You can have marginal gains if the packaging has been optimized for shipping. So no wasted space in the boxes, no wasted space in the containers or in the trucks. But that's not going to move the needle in terms of sustainability, at least environmental impact, compared to, for example, raw materials or efforts to reduce impact at production of the gloves. Consumption also is one way you can reduce your impact. The first action of any sustainability approach is to reduce. You've heard that: reduce, reuse, recycle. First, reduce, and there, obviously, the responsibility is on you. It's up to you to avoid wasting gloves, and any glove not wasted is a glove that you don't need to purchase, to store, that doesn't need to be transported, and that we don't need to manufacture. So we save a lot of resources all across the supply chain. However, manufacturers can help you reduce consumption. I'll take the example. For once, it's coming from our company. We have the smart pool dispenser on laboratory gloves. I'm not going to spend time explaining the details, but as you might be able to see there, it's two openings in one. The small opening only allows you to pick gloves with your fingertips, which means you can only pick one or two gloves at a time, which is exactly the quantity of gloves you need, only two hands. And it makes it difficult for people to go in and grab a big handful of gloves, like many people do, unfortunately. And then they have 3, 4, or 5 gloves in their hands, but they only need 2 still. So the extra gloves, well, they fall to the ground or they go to the bin directly. And these gloves you have purchased, but it never gets used. So if we can help you reduce waste that way, well, we're very happy to, and that's something you can also consider in your decision criteria and in your budgeting as well. And now we come to the end of life of the gloves. So the gloves have been manufactured, transported, used, and now you need to do something with them. They are trash, they are waste. Generally speaking, waste management, you will try first to reuse a product, then to recycle it or compost it. If none of those options are realistic, you'll incinerate, and in last resort, you'll send to landfill. Obviously, reusing is not an option here. It's disposable gloves. When they have been used, you don't reuse them. Please don't reuse them. They've been contaminated with who knows what. However, if you have gloves that are expired or whatnot, please reuse them. Give them to your employees to do gardening at home or whatever. It's not wasted. Composting, not an option. Gloves are not compostable. Even the so-called biodegradable gloves do not fall into that category. We'll come back to that. So that leaves us with 3 options: recycling, incineration, or landfill. Recycling seems very promising because, well, it's not going to be wasted, right? The thing is, disposable rubber gloves like latex, nitrile, neoprene cannot be truly recycled. The vulcanization process, the chemical process to make them into a rubber product is not reversible. So you cannot make new latex with latex gloves. You cannot make new nitrile compound with nitrile gloves. The only thing you can do, well, that can be done by the recyclers, is to grind the gloves into small particles and use that as fillers in plastic products. Rubber gloves are not plastic. You cannot melt them into plastic like you would with polyethylene or polyester or whatever. So only thing possible is to make it into very small particles and use that as filler into plastic products. I'm not going to give you the examples, but the picnic benches and stuff you can see sometimes. Is it really desirable? Maybe, maybe not. Keep in mind, recycling gloves in this way is only possible when the gloves are not contaminated. if they've been exposed to hazardous chemicals, active pharmaceutical ingredients, biological matter, the recycler cannot accept those gloves. And then the only option is to incinerate. So it's only if you have used gloves not contaminated that you might be able to send them to recycling. And if you consider the option of recycling, I ask you to be honest with yourselves and ask a question if it's a true sustainability advantage in the life cycle of the product, or are you interested in those recycling services only because it's a way to push the waste to someone else, and then it doesn't count in your own waste accounting system, and it disappears. If it's the second option, you just want to get rid of the wastes, so you don't own it anymore. Yeah, I mean, it might be an advantage in certain ways, but I would question if it's a true sustainability advantage. Incineration is in many cases the best option still. If the gloves are contaminated, as we established, that essentially is the only option other than landfill. And at least with incineration, you can recover the energy, or some of the energy, and you don't have problems with contamination. So you still get something out of the waste. Landfill is, well, of no benefit to anyone. It's essentially disappearing from Europe slowly, but it does. There's more and more pressure to not use landfill anymore. So hopefully you don't send your gloves to landfill, you have other options. And if you don't send your gloves to landfill because that's how it is in your country, you send them to incineration, or that's a choice you consciously made as a company. If you don't send your gloves to landfill, I would question why choose biodegradable gloves. I've had that example recently with a customer in Italy. They selected biodegradable gloves and were very happy to have a, sustainability benefits on their account. But then we asked what they do with the gloves once they've been used, and the gloves are sent to incineration. Biodegradability, whether it's real or not, is only valid if you send your waste to landfill. If the gloves are sent to be incinerated, there's no point to have biodegradable gloves. The gloves won't have time to biodegrade. On the contrary, you want them intact, so they have the maximum energy potential. So with that, I reach the conclusions of this webinar. And just as a reminder, please ask questions, understand the answers you're given by the brand, verify what they tell you. I would advise to prefer working with a brand that's an actual manufacturer, so you have more direct access to information and the assurance that all the information will remain true moving forward. Rely on third-party certification only if you understand the scope. If you don't understand the scope, do research, contact that third-party organism to have information. Always prefer sustainability claims that are product-specific rather than claims that are company-wide. Make sure the claims are solid, they're backed with data and not just vague statements. Always consider the entire life cycle of your product, of the gloves, from the choice of raw material all the way to waste. And if you can choose a more sustainable option earlier in the life cycle, it's always better. So don't only look at the end-of-life waste management and think you've done your job. If you have not looked at options to reduce the impact in production or in transport or in the choice of raw materials, well, you probably missed a few points. And don't forget that sustainability is not just about saving the planet, it's not just about the environment. It's important, but consider social responsibility as well. All right, so with that, I thank you for your attention. We still have a few minutes to take questions, and I will call up Jim to help me fetch them.
Hi. Thanks, Colin, Zach, for a great session. I've certainly learned something, so I appreciate that. We have got some questions which we'll try and rattle through in the 5 minutes or so left. So the first one is, thanks, Claire, for this question. Can you estimate the amount of fossil material needed for producing and shipping a known quantity of nitrile and latex gloves?
Not exactly. There are estimations for production. As I gave an example during the webinar, about 100 kilowatt hours. That energy is expressed in kilowatt hours, so that's usually associated with electricity, but you can convert if the energy used was gas, for example, you can convert the unit back to kilowatt hours. But then the largest unknown is really for the raw materials. Whether it's latex or nitrile or neoprene, some energy is necessary, and from one manufacturer to the other, whether they use fossil fuels or other sources, that's going to vary very widely. So it's very difficult to answer that question. I don't know of a single brand that gives such information, at least not that level of detail.
Okay, thank you. Another question for L2 rooms, which are a big part of certain areas' activities. The block by legislation on recycling of packaging. What would you suggest there?
So an L2 laboratory, you handle hazardous materials by definition. So I'm not familiar with exact legislation applying, and it might differ from a country to another, but I would assume incineration is just the best method for safety first, safety always first, and then for sustainability as well, rather than take the risk of recycling products that might be contaminated, just incinerate them. It's a safer and better option in the end.
Do gloves contain ingredients that would be harmful to the environment?
Yes. All disposable gloves will contain two different quantities, pigments or and antioxidants, accelerators, and some other chemicals used in the compound mix, like dispersants, surfactants, emulsifiers, plenty of chemicals in very, very small quantities, thankfully. But those chemicals can leach into the environment if the gloves are sent to landfill, for example. So yeah, once more, landfill is not an option I would recommend.
All right, thank you. A quick question, well, two questions in one, really. Excuse me. On the term of recycling gloves, so we're talking about clean, non-contaminated gloves. Can all the different materials, let's say you've got a neoprene, a latex, and a nitrile, can all of those three compounds go in the same recycling box, or do you need separate?
Well, technically, it will depend on what your recycler accepts, but typically everything needs to be sorted into different bins. especially with high quantity consumables like gloves, because the treatment will be different. You might have bins for safety glasses, and you can also put in there other products, whatever plastic, because it's easy to sort it out, because they are big items. But for gloves, it's very difficult for the recycler to know if a blue glove is made of nitrile or latex, and a green glove might be of whatever material. So typically, you need to do the sorting at your location, which means having different bins, and also depending on the system of recycling bins you use, whether they are um, um, a program you finance yourself, or if you use bins provided by a brand or a distributor, you might not be allowed to mix waste from different brands. So you might have a bin for the gloves of brand A and a different bin for the gloves of brand B, because
Yeah.
those bins are subsidized, so you cannot mix them up.
Cool. And then I think we're running out of time, but one quick question linked to recycling. So obviously for any contaminated products, they need to follow through an organization's own hazardous management process for any product that we would do with anything. So on a clean glove, we're saying that generally where it's non-contaminated, where possible, we can recycle them, and we put them through a recycling process that we've just alluded to. So you've got to kind of differentiate between contaminated and non-contaminated products ultimately for consideration for recycling.
Yes, which is very difficult to do, because you need to educate the users, and it's not always easy for them to segregate, and think, have my gloves been contaminated by hazardous material or not? So if it's different locations, different sites, different buildings, you might have this segregation, but if it depends on what you have been manipulating, it becomes very difficult to dissociate, and that's when you run risk to send the wrong gloves to recycling. So it's, yeah, not very practical.
Right, thank you. In terms, we have run over, so I'll conclude at that stage. If there are any other questions, then please do get in touch. As we mentioned at the beginning, the session has been recorded. We will send you a recording for those that joined after the link. You can listen back at your leisure. If you've got any thoughts or feedback, then please let us know on the email address shown, and you will get a certificate of attendance. So I thank everybody for your participation today, and we'll invite you to the next one as soon as we get that arranged. So thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.